It happened in less than 5 seconds, 5 seconds that would dismantle a man's career, shake an entire police department, and become a viral firestorm the whole country would talk about for weeks. Officer Brad Turner had punched people before, sometimes on duty, sometimes after a few beers, but never had his knuckles felt this kind of impact. Solid, sharp, personal. He didn't even hesitate. And then she stood up, blood on her lip, eyes locked on his with a fury that could freeze hell over. Brad felt something shift in the air, not fear, not yet, but a slow, creeping awareness that maybe he had just crossed a line he couldn't walk back from. The sidewalk around them erupted with murmurs. Phones came out. Someone gasped. "Oh my God, do you know who she is?" Brad didn't care. Or maybe he didn't want to care. All he saw was another non-compliant civilian who refused to follow orders. In his mind, that meant she was fair game. But this woman wasn't like the others. Her name was Denise Carter, 42 years old, West Point graduate, former FBI field director, decorated with more commendations than Brad had citations. And, as of 48 hours ago, she was officially the new police chief of Eastbrook City, Brad City. Brad didn't know that yet. All he knew was that he'd been called to a disturbance outside a cafe. A black woman allegedly blocking the sidewalk and arguing with patrons. When he arrived, she wasn't shouting. She wasn't blocking anything. She was sipping coffee, scrolling her phone, and refusing to show her ID to a man who barked orders at her without even saying hello. Brad's pride was as much a part of his uniform as the badge on his chest. The moment she questioned his authority, the moment she asked for his name, something in him snapped. The punch came almost automatically. Now, as Denise straightened her coat, a small but unmistakable smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't amusement, it was the kind of smile predators wear when they've decided the hunt is over. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career, Officer Turner," she said, her voice calm, even musical, but each syllable a blade. By the time backup arrived, the crowd was thick. Every camera phone caught the moment Brad tried to handcuff her, only for another uniformed officer to whisper urgently in his ear, "Brad, that's the new chief." The words hit harder than any punch Brad had ever thrown. Denise didn't resist arrest, she didn't need to. She simply stepped forward, past him, and addressed the officers around. "Gentlemen, I'll see you all at headquarters in 20 minutes. We have a lot to discuss about departmental conduct," she said, before turning her gaze back to Brad. "And as for you," the rest of the sentence didn't come out. It didn't need to. The silence was worse. Brad's mind raced as they returned to the station. Maybe she wouldn't press charges. Maybe she'd just write him up. Maybe the briefing room was full. Every ranking officer sat stiffly as Denise entered, the authority in her stride undeniable. She didn't look at anyone at first. Instead, she placed her badge on the table, slowly, deliberately. Then she looked at Brad. "Officer Turner, step forward," she said. The room went still. Brad stood. His stomach felt like it was full of stones. "You assaulted a civilian in broad daylight, with witnesses, without provocation," she said. "You acted not as a protector of this community, but as a threat to it." Brad's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I could fire you right now," Denise continued, "and maybe I should. But today, I want to teach you something you clearly never learned in uniform." She nodded to two officers near the back. They stepped forward, carrying something small, a simple wooden stool. They placed it in the center of the room. "Kneel," she said. The air seemed to suck out of the room. Brad hesitated, but the weight of every eye in the room pressed down on him. Slowly, he sank to his knees, his face burning. "This isn't about humiliating you," Denise said. "It's about reminding everyone here that this badge means service, not dominance. That the people you look down on are the same people you swore to protect." Her voice softened, but it carried. "I am your chief. I am also a black woman in America. And if you cannot respect me, you cannot respect this department to the law itself." Silence followed. Then, quietly, she told him to stand. The message had been delivered, and for Brad Turner, it would be the longest, most haunting lesson of his life. Brad Turner left the briefing room with his hands trembling, though he kept them shoved deep into his pockets. Outside the door, the usual chatter of the station seemed quieter, as if every officer had suddenly learned to whisper. Eyes followed him, some wide with disbelief, others with poorly hidden satisfaction. He knew how it looked. He also knew how quickly gossip spread in Eastbrook PD. By now, Every hallway probably knew that the toughest guy on the force had been ordered to kneel in front of the new chief. But humiliation wasn't the part that bothered him the most. What unsettled him, what gnawed at him, was that he still didn't believe he'd done anything wrong. That night, Brad sat alone at Murphy's Bar, a dingy dive near the station where cops went to complain without paperwork. He nursed a whiskey, staring into the amber liquid as if it might reveal some kind of moral compass. Eddie Graves, Graverson slid onto the stool next to him. Graves was an old-timer, 27 years on the job, with a mustache that looked like it belonged in the 80s and a permanent limp from a bullet wound in '99. "Heard you got baptized," Graves said, ordering a beer. Brad grunted. "She made me kneel. In front of everyone." Graves let out a low whistle. "Yeah, well, maybe you had it coming." Brad's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me. Brad, I've been around long enough to know you've got a temper. You take things personal. That's fine when you're dealing with some punk who just robbed a liquor store. But you went after her. In public. Without cause." Brad slammed his glass down. "She refused to follow a lawful order." "She didn't need to," Graves said simply. "You think the mayor's gonna back you up over her? She's got more pull than anyone in this city right now. And if half the rumors I've heard are true, she was brought in here to clean house. Starting with guys like you." The word clean house stuck in Brad's head like a nail. The next morning, an email from HR confirmed his worst fear: mandatory disciplinary hearing in 10 days. Attendance required. Suspension pending outcome. Suspension. That was the first step toward firing. And firing meant losing not just the badge, but the pension, the gun, the only life Brad had ever known. He needed leverage. That afternoon, he started digging. Not official digging. Brad wasn't stupid enough to leave a trail, but asking the right questions to the right people. One rumor kept popping up. Denise Carter had enemies in high places. A city councilman named Raymond Klein had been vocally opposed to her appointment, claiming she was too politically motivated for the role. Brad wondered if Klein might be looking for allies. 3 days later, Brad found himself sitting in a sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the city. Klein was in his late 50s, expensive suit, perfectly combed silver hair, and the kind of handshake that was just a little too firm. "I've heard about your incident," Klein said, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. "I imagine you're feeling rather cornered." "I just want to keep my job," Brad said. "And I don't think Chief Carter's here to give me a fair shot." Klein smiled faintly. "Let's just say, I share your skepticism about her leadership style. She's too idealistic, too focused on making statements. We need a chief who understands how the real world works." Brad took a sip of scotch. "So what's your plan?" Klein leaned back. "I've got people watching her. If we find the right kind of blemish on her record, the mayor will have no choice but to reconsider her position. If you help us, I can make sure your disciplinary hearing goes away." Brad knew it was dirty. He also knew he didn't care. The next week was a blur of shadowy meetings, quiet phone calls, and more whiskey than Brad usually drank. He learned that Denise was working on something big, something that scared certain powerful people. A citywide review of police conduct cases over the last 15 years. If she succeeded, dozens of past incidents could be reopened, including some Brad had been involved in. And it wouldn't stop there. Graves, Simmons, O'Leary, half the old guard could be on the chopping block. Klein's people wanted Brad to find something to discredit her before that review went public. And Brad was ready to play ball until the night everything changed. It was raining when Brad saw her again outside the station, talking to a group of teenagers under a flickering streetlight. He stayed in his car, engine idling, watching from a distance. She wasn't in uniform. She was in jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers, holding an umbrella over a young boy while the others crowded around, laughing and talking. Brad recognized one FEMA kid named Marcus who'd been caught spray painting squad cars last year. Denise was listening to them. Not lecturing, not barking orders. Listening. Brad had never seen a cop do that before. For some reason, it stuck with him the whole night. The next day, he dug into her file not to smear her, but to understand her. He found out she'd grown up in Eastbrook, just 2 neighborhoods over from where Brad had been raised. Her father had been a firefighter, her mother a schoolteacher. She'd lost her older brother to a police shooting when she was 17. The officer responsible had never faced charges. That was the year she applied to West Point. Brad stared at the screen for a long time, his coffee growing cold. By the time the disciplinary hearing came around, Brad's mind was a war zone. Klein was expecting him to deliver. Denise was expecting him to answer for his actions. And Bradwell, he wasn't sure what he wanted anymore. The hearing room was packed. The mayor sat at the head table, flanked by 2 city attorneys. Denise sat on the opposite side, calm and unreadable. Brad could feel Klein's eyes on him from the gallery. The proceedings began. Evidence was presented. Videos played. The punch looked worse every time Brad saw it. When it was his turn to speak, Brad stood, cleared his throat, and said something no one expected. "She didn't deserve it," he said quietly. "None of it. I let my pride get in the way of my duty. And I'm sorry." Murmurs rippled through the room. Klein's face went cold. "I'll accept whatever punishment the board sees fit," Brad finished, then sat down. Denise didn't smile. She didn't need to. The board deliberated for an hour. When they returned, the verdict was suspension without pay for 3 months, mandatory retraining, and probation for a year. Brad had expected worse. As the room emptied, Denise approached him. "You could have fought me today," she said. "You didn't." "Why?" Brad hesitated. "Because I finally realized. You're not here to destroy this department. You're here to save it." For the first time since they met, Denise's expression softened. "Prove it," she said, then walked away. From that day forward, Brad's life didn't get easier, but it did get clearer. The whispers about the cop who knelt faded. Slowly, he started seeing the job differently. Not as a battlefield, but as a responsibility. And though he'd never say it out loud, he owed that shift to the woman he once thought was his enemy. The same woman who had made him kneel so he could learn how to stand. It didn't take long for Brad to realize that apologizing in public had painted a target on his back. Some officers stopped talking to him altogether. Others muttered under their breath when he walked past words like traitor, bootlicker, sellout. Even Graves, who'd warned him about his temper, was now keeping his distance. But Denise, she didn't say much. She simply put him on assignments that forced him to interact with people he'd normally avoid: community meetings, school talks, neighborhood patrols, and areas he'd written off as lost causes. At first, Brad thought it was punishment. Then he realized it was something else. She was putting him where he had to listen. 3 weeks into his suspension, Brad got a call from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Marcus." The voice said the same teenager he'd seen Denise talking to that rainy night. "I don't know if I'm supposed to call you, but the chief said you might help." Brad frowned. "Help with what?" There was a pause, and then Marcus said, "My friend's in trouble. Cops are looking for him. They think he robbed a store, but he didn't. If they find him first, they're gonna hurt him." Brad's first instinct was to hang up. Off duty, suspended, this wasn't his problem. But something about the boy's voice, the fear, the urgency, made him grab his jacket. He found Marcus in an alley behind a laundromat, standing guard over a skinny kid with wide eyes and a busted lip. "This is Jamal," Marcus said. "They say he robbed Benson's Market. But we were at the rec center the whole time." Brad crouched down. "You got proof?" Jamal nodded quickly. "Security cameras. They got cameras there." But nobody asked. Brad knew what that meant. In certain parts of Eastbrook, asking wasn't the first step. He took the boys to Denise. Her reaction wasn't surprise, it was immediate action. Within hours, she had the footage from the rec center in hand. Jamal was on camera playing basketball at the exact time of the robbery. 2 days later, the department quietly cleared his name. But Brad wasn't satisfied. "Who put his name out there in the first place?" he asked Denise. She looked at him for a long moment. "That's what I'm trying to change. We rush to judgment. We target certain kids without evidence. And once that word is out, guilty or note, it sticks." Brad thought of the look on Jamal's face when he'd first seen him. That mix of fear and hopelessness. He'd seen it before. Too many times. That night, Brad ignored 2 calls from Raymond Klein. On the third, he picked up. "You're going soft," Klein said without preamble. "You think Carter's your friend now? She's not. She'll hang you out to dry the moment you're no use to her." "She's not like you," Brad said flatly. Klein chuckled. "That's where you're wrong, Turner. Everybody plays the game. The question is whether you want to be a player or a pawn." Brad hung up. A week later, Denise called Brad into her office. "I'm putting you back on duty," she said. "Probation still stands, but you've earned a chance to show me what you can do." Brad nodded. "What's the assignment?" Her answer caught him off guard. "You're working with me directly. There's a task force forming to review past misconduct cases. I want you on it." Brad blinked. "Me? I've got my own cases in that pile." "That's exactly why I want you there," Denise said. If you can face your own record, you can face anyone's. The work was brutal. They sifted through decades of files, complaints ignored, body cam footage lost, witness statements buried. One night, while reviewing a case from 2012, Brad stopped cold. The name on the report was Marcus's older brother. The file claimed he'd resisted arrest, attacked an officer, and been shot in self-defense. But the witness statement, one that had never been submitted to the DA, told a different story. It said the officer had punched him first. Brad looked at Denise, who was reading over his shoulder. This is your brother's case, he realized. Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened around the file. Yeah, and the officer who wrote that report? He got promoted. Twice. The deeper they dug, the more resistance they met. Files went missing overnight. City council members started making noise about wasting taxpayer dollars on old cases. And then Brad got the call he'd been dreading. It was Kline again, but this time, his voice was sharper. You've made your choice, Turner. Don't come looking for me when she takes you down with her. Brad didn't answer. A few nights later, as Brad left the station, he noticed the tires on his truck had been slashed. He didn't need a note to know it was a warning. The next morning, Denise called an emergency meeting. Someone had leaked details of the task force to the press. The headlines weren't kind. Chief Carter's witch hunt targets Eastbrook police veterans. This isn't an accident, Denise told the room. They want us rattled. They want us to stop. We don't stop. Brad caught her eye and saw something he hadn't before, a flicker of exhaustion beneath the steel. She was fighting battles on every front. And for the first time in his career, Brad felt like the badge meant more than just authority. It meant responsibility. That weekend, Brad went to see Marcus and Jamal at the rec center. The boys were playing basketball, laughing like nothing had ever happened. When Marcus saw him, he jogged over. Hey, Officer Turner. Thanks. For, believing us. Brad smiled faintly. Just doing my job. Marcus tilted his head. You didn't used to be like that. The words hit harder than Brad expected. Back at home, Brad found himself staring at the old photo on his mantle, him in uniform on his first day, standing next to his father, who'd been a cop for 30 years. His father had taught him that the job was about control, about not letting them see weakness. Now Brad wondered if his father had been wrong. Or maybe just incomplete. 2 days later, Denise called him in again. We've got a problem, she said. Someone on the inside is sabotaging the review. And I think I know who. Brad didn't need to ask. He could already see Kline's shadow behind it. Tell me what to do, he said. She studied him for a moment. I need you to go back to some of the guys you used to work with. See if they'll talk. Off the record. Brad hesitated. They're not exactly my biggest fans right now. Then you've got nothing to lose, she said. What Brad found over the next week would change everything and set in motion the events that would lead to the explosive final confrontation neither he nor Denise could avoid. But that was still to come. Brad had been in enough interrogations to know when someone was lying and when they were terrified of telling the truth. Over the next week, he met with 5 officers he'd once called friends. 4 of them brushed him off. The 5th Sergeant Kelly didn't. They met in a nearly empty diner at the edge of town. Kelly kept his voice low. They've been shredding files. Not just the task force cases. Anything that could tie back to the old guard. Kline's name is all over it. But he's not doing the dirty work himself. He's got people inside. Brad leaned forward. Names. Kelly hesitated. If I give you names, I'm done here. You'll be done either way if this goes through, Brad said. When the truth comes out, you're either a part of the cleanup or part of the mess. Kelly swallowed hard, then slid a folded piece of paper across the table. Don't say it came from me. Denise's eyes narrowed when she read the list. 3 of these guys are still active, she said. 1's in evidence storage. No wonder files are disappearing. Brad nodded. We take this public, we might not get another shot. They'll bury it deeper. Denise looked at him for a long moment. Then we go big. 2 nights later, the community center's gymnasium was packed for a public forum. Officially, it was about community police relations. Unofficially, it was Denise's stage. Reporters lined the walls. Council members sat stiffly in the front row. Kline wasn't there, but Brad knew his people were. Denise stepped to the mic. She didn't start with statistics. She didn't start with accusations. She started with a story. When I was 17, my brother was killed by an Eastbrook officer, she said. The report said he attacked the officer. The witness statement said otherwise. That statement never made it to the DA's desk. That officer kept his job and got promoted. The room was silent. For years, I believed nothing could change. That the system was too big, too protected, too untouchable. But I'm standing here tonight because that belief was wrong. We can change, but only if we stop pretending the rod isn't there. She glanced at Brad. And sometimes, change starts with the people you least expect. Brad's stomach tightened. She held up the list Kelly had given them. These are the names of officers currently under investigation for destroying evidence in active misconduct reviews. If you think this is a witch hunt, you're right, because I'm hunting the people who've been casting shadows over this city for decades. Murmurs swept the room. Cameras flashed. Brad could see the ripple effect, council members shifting uncomfortably, officers in the back whispering into their phones. And then, the disruption came. A man in a dark suit pushed his way to the front. Raymond Klein. "This is outrageous," he barked. "You are undermining the integrity of the police department, the safety of this city." "No," Denise cut in, her voice calm but slicing through his like a blade. "I'm restoring it." Klein's face darkened. "You're finished, Carter. The mayor will have your badge before sunrise." The crowd erupted, some cheering, some shouting. Denise didn't flinch. She looked at Brad, and in that split second, he knew exactly what she needed him to do. Brad stepped forward, microphone in hand. "My name is Officer Brad Turner," he began, voice steady. 3 months ago, I assaulted this woman, our police chief, because I thought I could get away with it. Because I thought my badge made me untouchable. I was wrong. She held me accountable, and she's been holding this department accountable ever since." He turned toward Klein. "The people she's naming tonight? They're guilty, and I've got the proof." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Brad pulled out a flash drive. "This is every piece of evidence I've collected over the last 2 weeks. Names, dates, video. The people trying to destroy this department from the inside aren't in this room to defend themselves, because cowards never are. But I am, and I'm done protecting the wrong side." By the time the forum ended, Klein was already on the phone, his voice a hiss. Reporters swarmed Denise and Brad. The footage of Brad's confession and Denise's speech hit the news before midnight. The mayor couldn't fire her now, not without looking like he was silencing a whistleblower. 2 of the officers on Kelly's list resigned the next day. The third was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. And for the first time in years, the people of Eastbrook saw cracks in the wall. A week later, Brad found himself standing outside Denise's office. She waved him in without looking up from her paperwork. "You went off script," she said. "Yeah," he replied. "But it worked." She looked up then, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "It did. You realize what that means, right?" Brad frowned. "That I'm still on probation? That you're finally becoming the cop you should have been all along," she said. On his way out, Brad passed Marcus and Jamal in the hallway. They were there to see Denise about starting a youth advisory board. "Hey, Officer Turner," Marcus called. "Guess you're one of the good guys now." Brad chuckled. "Working on it, kid." Months later, long after the headlines faded, the image still lived online. A younger Brad Turner kneeling in front of Denise Carter. People argued about it in comment sections. Some said it was humiliation. Others said it was justice. Brad didn't care anymore. He knew what it really was. It was the moment he learned that the badge on his chest wasn't a shield for his pride, it was a promise to protect people, even from himself. And for the rest of his career, he intended to keep it. That was how a punch meant to silence a black woman ended up giving her the platform to change an entire city. And how the man who threw it learned to stand by, first learning how to kneel. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.